رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم: ربنا إني أسكنت من ذريتي بواد غير ذي زرع عند بيتك المحرم ربنا ليقيموا الصلاة فاجعل أفئدة من الناس تهوي إليهم وارزقهم من الثمرات لعلهم يشكرون. Respected brothers and sisters, صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. This past week, the whole Muslim world, the Shi'i world, commemorated the event of Ashura, the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And this was something that was being commemorated all over the world. Perhaps in every corner of the world, in every country, in every city, there was a majlis for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, commemorating Ashura. Now, this brings a lot of questions. A lot of people, they ask, what is Ashura? Imam al-Hussein, the grandson of the Prophet, was killed. Why was the grandson of the Prophet killed? What happened where we are commemorating one day in history, one day that took place over 1,400 years ago, 1,300 years ago, we are treating it as if it just took place. You know, when you see people crying and shedding tears and mourning Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, if an outsider would come in and they would look at the Shia, at the mourners, they see them crying, they would think that some relative, a friend, a family has just passed away. This is a secret. There's a reason behind this. Where is all this love coming from? Where is all this devotion? I have a personal experience with this, where you see many events, they don't draw these crowds. But Ashura and Muharram and the commemoration of Imam al-Hussein draws thousands of people. All of the mosques are packed. All of the Husseyniyat are packed. People, they go out of their way in order to serve Imam al-Hussein, in order to remember Imam al-Hussein, in order to shed tears for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. If any of you have gone for the Arba'een Ziyarah, the largest human gathering, annual human gathering, the largest pilgrimage that takes place on earth annually, is the Ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. If any of you have gone, you will be amazed when you see how people, they go out of their way in order to serve the Zuwar of Imam al-Hussein, in order to feed people who are remembering and commemorating Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. This is something that no one has. No one. Why we don't remember, with all our respect, our faith in Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi and Amir al-Mu'mineen and the other Imams, but they're not remembered in such a way. What is the secret with Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam? Why? So, inshallah, tonight, we want to address some of these questions, some of these issues. I'm going to talk a little bit and then we'll open it for further questions if any of you have. The verse that I began with is the verse of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the dua of Prophet Ibrahim. رَبَّنَا إِنِّي أَسْكَنْتُ مِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِي بِوَادٍ غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ عِنْدَ بَيْتِكَ الْمُحَرَّمِ. When he brought his family, when he brought Hajar and Ismail, he placed them in Mecca, and there was no land, there was no trees, no people living in Mecca at that time. بِوَادٍ غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ عِنْدَ بَيْتِكَ الْمُحَرَّمِ رَبَّنَا لِيُقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ, for the sake of salat. فَاجْعَلْ أَفْئِدَةً مِنَ النَّاسِ تَهْوِي إِلَيْهِمْ. This is the part that I want to focus on. Ibrahim alayhi salam, 5,000 years ago, he says, "Oh Allah, I brought my progeny in this land, in Mecca, because of salah, because of nearness to God, because of relationship, building a bond with God, because I want my progeny to be those who call people to God. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answered him. From the progeny of Ibrahim are many of the prophets, right? Thousands of prophets perhaps are from the progeny of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. But Ibrahim, he also does another dua. He says, فَاجْعَلْ أَفْئِدَةً مِّنَ النَّاسِ تَهْوِي إِلَيْهِمْ. He says, I want the hearts of the people to be attracted to my progeny. I want people's hearts, even 5,000 years later, however long later, I want people's hearts to be attracted to my progeny. And Allah did answer the dua of Prophet Ibrahim. Today, why is Jesus loved? Why is Moses loved? Why is Rasulullah loved? Why are the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt loved? Because of the dua of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. And similarly with Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. فَاجْعَلْ أَفْئِدَةً مِّنَ النَّاسِ تَهْوِي إِلَيْهِمْ. So here, one of the reasons that we are attracted to Imam al-Hussein is because there's something behind the scenes. It's something metaphysical. We don't know why. We don't know the secret. This is one dimension you look at it. And then there's also another dimension, the physical, the materialistic, the way that we can comprehend things. And that was because Imam al-Hussein sacrificed, Imam al-Hussein loved, Imam al-Hussein gave so much. Therefore, we love the one who loves. We love the one who sacrifices. We love the one who has given. Therefore, we are attracted to the message of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And in addition to that, the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt, they insisted on their followers, Rasulullah, to begin, even before the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Fatimah al-Zahra, and then after the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein, the Imams, one after the other, they encouraged their followers to shed tears for Imam al-Hussein. Al-Buka al-Hussein. Al-Tabaki al-Hussein. You can't cry, you can't bring down a tear. You bring your head down and you try to act like you're crying. Act like you're sad for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Writing poetry, reciting poetry for the sake of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. These are all things that are encouraged by the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. We will give some examples inshallah later about some of the poetry and some of the poets that recited in front of the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Now, who killed Imam al-Hussein? This is also another very important question. We know what? We know who it was. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he was killed in the year 61 after Hijrah in the land of Karbala on the 10th of Muharram. Who killed Imam al-Hussein? This is a very important question. Today, some people, until today, they try to shy away and hide from this question because this is a question that's going to expose many people. And there are some that they would rather not expose some people, because if they expose them, then that means it's going to bring down the house of cards. What do they call it? It's going to expose other people. Who were the murderers of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam? The first and foremost, the person first responsible for killing Imam al-Hussein was Yazid ibn Muawiyah. Yazid ibn Muawiyah, he is the son of Muawiyah. He wants to be the Khalifa of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. And he writes a letter to the governor of Medina telling him, I want a general bay'ah from people and I want a specific bay'ah from several individuals. One of them was Imam al-Hussein. One was Abdullah ibn Zubayr. One was Abdullah ibn Umar. He says, I want a specific bay'ah from these individuals. The governor of Medina, he summons Imam al-Hussein in Rajab, meaning 6 months, more than 6 months before the day of Ashura. He summons Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and they try to corner Imam al-Hussein to give a bay'ah, to give allegiance to Yazid. Imam al-Hussein alayhi, now Yazid was already in power. Yazid, Imam al-Hussein giving him bay'ah or not giving him bay'ah was not going to change whether Yazid remains in power or does not remain in power. So this is the key point here. They wanted legitimacy from Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And Imam al-Hussein, first he tries to, tell them, I can't give bay'ah right now, it's at night. When bay'ah, allegiance should be given in front of people. They say you have to give bay'ah. Imam al-Hussein, he makes his stance very clear. Inna Yazid rajulun fasiq, شارب الخمر, قاتل النفس المحترمة, مثلي لا يبايع مثله. Yazid is a sinner. Yazid is a murderer. Yazid is an alcoholic. Yazid disrespects the laws of God and the laws of his prophet. A person like me does not give bay'ah to a person like Yazid. Not only I don't give bay'ah, anyone like me cannot give bay'ah to a man like Yazid. So Yazid, he said either bay'ah or death. He tried to kill Imam al-Hussein in Medina. Imam al-Hussein escaped that night. He escapes, he goes to Mecca because it was getting close to Umrah season, Hajj season. He goes, he was waiting for the Hajj. Then he hears that the governor of Mecca has received orders to kill Imam al-Hussein even if he's holding on to the Kaaba, to the drapes of the Kaaba. That same place that was built by Ibrahim, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about it, وَمَنْ دَخَلَهُ كَانَ آمِنًا. Whoever enters is safe. When you go to Mecca, you're not allowed to take out a plant from the ground. You're not allowed to hurt an animal, an insect in Mecca. But the blood of Imam al-Hussein was made halal in Mecca. So Imam al-Hussein, to protect the sanctity of the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he decided to leave. He leaves. Why did he leave? He left to protect his life. And second, where was he headed? He was headed to Iraq. Why was he headed to Iraq? Because as soon as Muawiyah dies and Yazid comes to power, the people of Kufa, thousands of people in Kufa, they wrote letters to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, inviting him to come and lead a revolution and lead a revolt against Bani Umayyah, against Yazid. So they write a letter to Imam al-Hussein, and Imam al-Hussein had carried these letters with him. He's carrying them with him, and even on the day of Ashura, he brought out these letters. He brought out these letters, these scrolls. He brought them out in a huge box. He brought them and he began to show them and read them to the people there. And he began to call them one by one. Oh, you Hajjar ibn Abjur, did you not write a letter for me? You, did you not write a letter for me? You, did you not write a letter for me? They tell him, yes, we wrote a letter, but now things have changed. Anyways, the first person who killed Imam al-Hussein is responsible for the murder of Imam al-Hussein is Yazid. And then you have Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, who's the governor of Kufa. Kufa had a governor, An-Nu'man ibn Bashir. But because the people of Kufa was a mixed city. You had Shi'as and you had non-Shi'as. You had people that were loyal to the Ahlul Bayt, and you had people who were not loyal to the Ahlul Bayt. They were loyal to the Umayyads. And then you had in between people who were loyal to their pockets, loyal to money. They were following their own interests. Today, some people, they come and they say, you Shi'as, you cry for Imam al-Hussein, you beat your chest for Imam al-Hussein. You know who killed Imam al-Hussein? It was the Shi'as that killed Imam al-Hussein. This is one of the misconceptions. They say it was the Shi'as that killed Imam al-Hussein because not a single member in the army that fought Imam al-Hussein on the day of Ashura, there was not one single member that came from Sham. They were all from Kufa. So they say, you people of Kufa, they wrote the letters to Imam al-Hussein inviting him, and then they came out fighting him. So it was the Shi'as that killed Imam al-Hussein. First of all, the refute to this is that no, it was not the Shi'as who killed Imam al-Hussein. A Shi'i is a person who loves Imam al-Hussein, who follows Imam al-Hussein. Does it make sense that a person who's Shi'i, who's a person who follows Imam al-Hussein, they're going to come and kill Imam al-Hussein? Of course not. The real Shia within Kufa, like Al-Mukhtar, like several others, they were all imprisoned. Maytham al-Tammar, that close companion of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Maytham al-Tammar was killed days before Ashura. He was crucified by Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. And many of the real staunch Shi'as, they were imprisoned. The real Shi'as, they were imprisoned or they escaped. Like Habib ibn Mudahir, like Muslim ibn Awsaja, like several of those individuals, they left. They managed to escape. There were others who sat in their home. They didn't go out to fight Imam al-Hussein, but because the authorities, they came to power. Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, he started arresting anyone who shows compassion and love to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Some of them, they stayed in their homes. Some of them, they were arrested. And some of them, they went out and they made it to Karbala to defend Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. So you have Kufa, the demographics of Kufa, you have the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt. There were individuals who were enemies of the Ahlul Bayt from day one, like Shimr ibn al-Jawshan, like others. Then you have others who were the Shia, they were imprisoned. And then you have a third category of people like Hajjar ibn Abjar and others who wrote letters to Imam al-Hussein asking him to come, but then they fought Imam al-Hussein. These individuals, they were not Shia of Imam al-Hussein. They were not Shia of the Ahlul Bayt. These individuals, they thought Imam al-Hussein is going to come. He's going to lead a movement against Yazid. We're living in this town. We have to ride the wave. We have to ride the bandwagon. If he's going to come, he's going to establish a government. And people did not think that a person like Yazid is going to be able to actually, be successful in his movement. And they thought, Imam al-Hussein, the grandson of the Prophet, people are going to be around him. He's going to have a movement. So let us sign up to be a part of this movement so that we will be the beneficiaries, so that we will benefit, so that we will have positions of power, so that we will have positions of authority. So there's a sign-up list of writing letters to Imam al-Hussein. Let's also go and add our name to that. So their real intention was not because they were supporting Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Their real intention was just to, if Imam al-Hussein is successful, if he's able to lead a successful movement against Yazid, then they were a part of it. They have signed up. So they were trying to make money out of it. They were trying to benefit out of it. And you see that most of those people who fought Imam al-Hussein, they were doing it for dunya. They were doing it for worldly pleasures. Yazid was doing it for power. He assigns Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, who becomes the governor, and he declares martial law. He kills Muslim ibn Aqil. He begins to arrest anyone who's showing any support, and he prepares and mobilizes an army to intercept Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, he comes to Umar ibn Sa'd, the third person. Umar ibn Sa'd, he tells him, I want you to lead this army that is going to go and intercept Imam al-Hussein and kill Imam al-Hussein. Now Umar ibn Sa'd, he goes back to the tribe of Quraysh, meaning that there's a long distance relatives. He is related in a far way to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. So when they first came and they gave him this offer, go and kill Imam al-Hussein, Umar ibn Sa'd said, no, Hussein is my cousin. Hussein is my family member. I'm not going to go and fight him. So they tell him, okay, you want to fight him? We are going to give you the authority of Ray. Ray is current day Tehran. They told him, we're going to make you the governor of Ray. You want to be the governor of Ray? You have to go and kill Imam al-Hussein. So he has words of poem. He's a dialogue between him with himself. He says, أَأَتْرُكُ مُلْكَ الرَّيِّ وَالرَّيُّ مُنْيَتِي أَمَرْجِعُ مَأْثُومًا بِقَتْلِ حُسَيْنِ. Should I leave the mulk of Ray while Ray is what I want? I want to be the leader of Ray. أَمَرْجِعُ مَأْثُومًا بِقَتْلِ حُسَيْنِ. But I have to go and kill Hussein. And then he says, يَقُولُونَ. They say, أَنَّ اللَّهَ خَالِقُ جَنَّةٍ وَنَارٍ وَغُلَّ يَدَيْنِ. They say, meaning he doesn't even have faith. They say that God created hell and heaven and we're going to be held accountable. فَإِن صَدَقُوا بِمَا يَقُولُونَ فَإِنِّي أَتُوبُ لِلرَّحْمَنِ مُنذُ سَنَتَيْنِ. If they are right in what they say, then I will repent in 2 years. I will ask Allah to forgive me in 2 years. On the day of Ashura, Imam al-Hussein, he tells Umar ibn Sa'd, he tells him, "Oh Umar ibn Sa'd, you're not going to enjoy the beauties of this dunya. You're not going to have the wheat. You're not going to be able to have the wheat of this dunya." Meaning you're not going to have anything. And then he tells him, and it's as if, and I will tell you, it's as if the kids will be playing with your head. And this is exactly what happened. Within 2 years, within a while, Al-Mukhtar, he comes and he revolts, and he finds out Umar ibn Sa'd where he is. He goes and they behead him. The army of Mukhtar, they behead him while he was there in Kufa, and the kids, they begin to play with his head. They didn't enjoy the dunya. So we said the first responsible was Yazid, then Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, then Umar ibn Sa'd, and then you have several others who were the active murderers of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, like Shimr ibn al-Jawshan, who, according to reports, he was the man who beheaded Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. You have Sinan ibn Anas. He lodged a spear in the body of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, which was a fatal spear that was, a fatal attack on Imam al-Hussein. And you have several others, their names are mentioned in the Maqtal, the crimes that they committed against Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. So we answered, why are we remembering Imam al-Hussein? We answered who. Another very important question that we have to address is, how do we know what happened to Imam al-Hussein? Right now, we're living 1400 years after Ashura. How do I know? The Khatib says, then came out Al-Qasim and he said this. Then came out Al-Hurr bin Yazid al-Riyahi, and Al-Abbas, he says, "Wallahi in qata'tumu yamini inni uhami abadan an dini wa an imamin sadiq al-yaqini." How do we know all of this? We have these reports that are recited in the Maqtal, which have a lot of details in them. How do we know all of this? And this is a very important question. This is a very important question that that we need to address. And why, how do we know all of these things? So here, we know a lot of these details from reporters that were there. There were reporters that were there on the day of Ashura. They recorded everything. And this is how we know all of the events that took place on the day of Ashura. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The reports that relate to us what happened on the day of Ashura, they're all reported and they're all there. Because first of all, you have survivors of the event. You have survivors that were there and they survived the event of the day of Ashura. For example, you have Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam. You have Imam al-Baqir, two Imams that were present and they survived on the day of Ashura. Imam Zayn al-Abidin was not killed. Imam al-Baqir was young. Therefore, they know, they relate to us the events that happened. You have other members from the family of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, like Sayyidah Zainab, like Sukaina, like Ar-Rabab, Ruqayya, others. Ruqayya passed away, but you have others that survived the events of Ashura from the family of Imam al-Hussein. Furthermore, you have some from the enemies of Imam al-Hussein. From the enemies, there were enemies that their job was to report what happened, because they have to tell Yazid what happened. One of them, we always, in the Maqtal, and when we remember the story of Imam al-Hussein, they mention his name. He mentions the story, for example, with Al-Qasim. He said, we saw a young man coming out, his face shining like the moon. And then he says, when I saw him coming out, he says, he went and he hugged his uncle Imam al-Hussein, and they both began to cry. Al-Qasim, the son of Imam al-Hasan. That reporter is a man by the name of Hamid ibn Muslim or Humayd ibn Muslim. He was a reporter there on the day of Ashura, sitting on the side of the enemies. He also reports, for example, after Imam al-Hussein was killed, he said, we came and we brought water to the children of Imam al-Hussein, and we saw them, they began to run and they were afraid of us, and they attacked the tent and the camp of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. So there were eyewitnesses on the day of Ashura from the family of Imam al-Hussein, survivors, from the enemies, and there were individuals who lived, who were there in Karbala with Imam al-Hussein. They were injured, but they survived the attacks. Not everyone was killed on the day of Ashura. Not all of the men. Some of us, we have the idea that every single man was killed. No, there were some survivors. Because after killing Imam al-Hussein, the army, they come and they discover there are some people that are injured, they still have life in them. Then they say, some of them, they didn't kill them, they left them. One of them is Al-Hasan ibn al-Hasan, Al-Hasan al-Muthanna. You know, one of the sons of Imam al-Hasan, perhaps the oldest son of Imam al-Hasan, his name is Al-Hasan ibn al-Hasan. On the day of Ashura, he goes out, he fights, he's injured, he falls to the ground, he stays injured, then Imam al-Hussein is killed. Then they come, they want to behead him. Then some of his mother's side of the family, they come and they say, no, you already got what you wanted. You wanted to kill Hussein, Imam al-Hussein, you leave him. His khawal, his uncles from his mother's side, they took him to Kufa, they healed his wounds, and then several months later, he goes to Medina and he marries Fatima, the daughter of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Subhanallah, Allah wanted the progeny of Imam al-Hussein to continue through Imam Zain al-Abidin, and the progeny of Imam al-Hasan to continue as well through his son, his only surviving son, Al-Hasan al-Muthanna. Because you have other sons of Imam al-Hasan, like Al-Qasim, like Abdullah ibn al-Hasan, they were all killed on the day of Ashura. But this man, Al-Hasan al-Muthanna, he survived. And then reporters, they say there were other individuals. For example, a man by the name of Uqbah ibn Sam'an. Uqbah ibn Sam'an كان مرافقا للحسين منذ بداية المشوار حتى وقع في أسر ابن زياد. He was with Imam al-Hussein, and they say he was the servant of Ar-Rabab, the wife of Imam al-Hussein, a person who was a helper. He was with them on the day of Ashura. He was injured, but then they took him as a captive to Kufa and then they let him go. He narrates some of the reports. He says, I saw Imam al-Hussein on the day of Ashura. He woke up and such happened, such and such took place. Another man by the name of Al-Muraqqa ibn Thumam al-Asadi. He was injured. Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad wanted to kill him. And then his tribe, they said, no, you already got what you wanted. You leave our man. Another man, Al-Dhahhak ibn Abdullah al-Mashriqi al-Hamadani. This man, his story is very interesting. You know, on the way to Karbala, Imam al-Hussein was recruiting followers. He wasn't recruiting supporters so that they could fight for him. Imam al-Hussein, from day one, he didn't send them a wrong message. From day one, Imam al-Hussein knew that he was going to be killed. He knew that he was going to be martyred. He tells them, come with me so that you attain the ultimate victory. So this man, Al-Dhahhak ibn Abdullah al-Mashriqi al-Hamadani, he tells Imam al-Hussein, I will support you as long as you have supporters. But if you don't have any supporters, if you don't have anyone fighting with you, then I'm going to go. There were other people who, they rejected Imam al-Hussein. They tell him, we have family, we have children, we have things here and there. And they made excuses to not stand with Imam al-Hussein. But there were others, like this man, Al-Dhahhak. He tells Imam al-Hussein, I will support you. Imam al-Hussein tells him, okay, I will accept that from you. He says, on the day of Ashura, I went and I put my horse in a tent so that the horse would not be hurt, so that the horse would not be killed. I put it in a tent, meaning he had his escape ready. He said, I began to fight, and Imam al-Hussein does a dua for him. He says, may Allah not paralyze your arms. Imam al-Hussein did a dua for him because there's a reason. Imam al-Hussein wants this man to live and tell the story. He said, I began to fight. Then once I saw everyone was killed, I go to Imam al-Hussein, I tell him, Ya Aba Abdullah, I did what I told you that I was going to do. I told you I was going to stay with you as long as you have supporters. Imam al-Hussein tells him, yes, you did. Now go. He goes and he rides his horse. He had hid it in the tent. He goes and he rides his horse and he goes. Several men chase him, but then they're not able to catch him. This man, Al-Dhahhak, he narrates the events that took place on the day of Ashura. He tells us some of the events, and these events are reported, are mentioned by reporters. Now, the day of Ashura took place. It became not just the talk of the town, it became the talk for the next several decades. People are talking about the day of Ashura. Until now, we're talking about Ashura. So imagine, people are definitely going to be talking about Ashura and the events that took place on the day of Ashura. So now, you have a group of people that begin reporting and documenting. Okay, I heard from this eyewitness, this is what he said. I heard from her, this is what she said. They begin to write them. One of the first to begin writing and reporting the maqtal of Imam al-Hussein, the first to write the maqtal of Imam al-Hussein was one of the men who was the companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen and the companion of Imam al-Hasan and the companion of Imam al-Hussein by the name of Al-Asbagh ibn Nubata. Al-Asbagh ibn Nubata, we mentioned his story when we remember the martyrdom of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Al-Asbagh ibn Nubata, he walked in on Imam Ali and he saw Imam Ali while he was laying. And when Imam Ali was buried, he was one of those who attended the burial of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Al-Asbagh ibn Nubata, he writes the first maqtal for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Unfortunately, the maqtal that was written by Al-Asbagh ibn Nubata has not survived. But then you have another person who comes after him who was from the companions of Imam al-Baqir and Imam al-Sadiq by the name of Abu Mikhnaf Lut ibn Yahya al-Azdi al-Ghamidi. He dies year 157 after Hijrah. Imam al-Hussein dies, was killed year 61 after Hijrah. So this man, Abu Mikhnaf, he lives to the time of Imam al-Baqir and Imam al-Sadiq. So he writes the maqtal. Today, many of the reports of the maqtal of Imam al-Hussein are brought to us through this man. The maqtal of Abu Mikhnaf, and you still have it, you could Google it. The maqtal of Abu Mikhnaf. Abu Mikhnaf becomes a reliable reporter because he heard from eyewitnesses. He heard from individuals who survived Ashura, and they become eyewitnesses. And Abu Mikhnaf, he writes from them. He writes the maqtal from them. And one of the Sunni scholars, for example, At-Tabari, he writes many pages, probably 50, 60 pages on Imam al-Hussein. He reports from Abu Mikhnaf. So Sunni and Shi'i scholars report from the maqtal of Abu Mikhnaf. And this is how we have many of the reports about Ashura. What happened on the day of Ashura. Now, another very important point is the remembrance of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. The remembrance of Imam al-Hussein in such a way where we recite it in poetry and you raise your voice and there's crying and there's shedding tears for Imam al-Hussein. Where did this come from? This was also inspired by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, who was the first to cry for Imam al-Hussein, and it was also inspired by those who came after the event of Ashura. Imam Zayn al-Abidin, he was the first to cry for Imam al-Hussein. Sayyidah Zainab, the first to make a scene. She goes out, she sees the mutilated body of Imam al-Hussein, and she makes a scene. She begins crying in front of everyone. Wa Jaddah, wa Muhammadah, sallat alayka malaikatu sama, hadha Husaynuka bil-ara. She makes a scene, crying for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And then the Imams, one after the other, Imam al-Baqir, Imam al-Sadiq, Imam Musa al-Kadhim, Imam al-Rida, all of the Imams, they insist on their followers to visit the grave of Imam al-Hussein. We have hundreds of reliable reports of the Imams telling people, go and visit the grave of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And also you have the Imams encouraging people to recite poetry and lament the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. One of those individuals by the name of Abu Harun al-Makfuf. Abu Harun al-Makfuf, he goes to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And Imam al-Sadiq tells him, Ya Aba Harun, anshidni shi'ran fi jaddi al-Hussein. I want you to recite poetry in praise, eulogizing what happened to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. So Abu Harun, he begins to recite, Umrur ala jadath al-Hussein, وقل لأعظمه الزكية يا أعظم لا زلت من وطفاء ساكبة روية ما لذ عيش بعد رضك بالجياد الأعوجية. He says, go and pass over the corpse of Imam al-Hussein and see Umrur ala jadath al-Hussein وقل لأعظمه الزكية, and speak to the mutilated body and the bones of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and then say, Ya ma ladha aishun, no life is not worth living after what happened to the bones, to the body of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he tells him, tell me more, rahimakallah, may Allah have mercy on you, recite more. So Abu Harun al-Makfuf, he begins to speak to the mother of Imam al-Sadiq, Farwa. He says, Ya Farwa qumi wandubi mawlaki wa ala al-Hussein fas'adi bibukaki. Imam al-Sadiq, he puts a partition and he begins to hear the loud crying of the ladies of the family of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. You have another very important famous reciter, and that is Da'bil ibn Ali al-Khuza'i. He goes to Imam al-Rida alayhi salam and he recites a very famous poem to the Imam about Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. He recites it, he tells the Imam, he goes all the way to Khurasan from Kufa. He goes all the way to Khurasan and he tells the Imam, I wrote a poem for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam and I want to recite it for you. So the Imam tells him, recite it for me. And he recites his famous poem, Madarasu ayatin khalat min tilawatin. And then he begins to talk about Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. He begins to talk about Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and then the Imam accepts this poem and he praises Da'bil. And this poem that what he recited in front of Imam al-Rida becomes very famous, where people, Shi'as all over the Muslim world, they begin to memorize it. They begin to recite the poetry of Da'bil ibn Ali al-Khuza'i in praise of Imam al-Hussein and giving condolences to Fatima al-Zahra about the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Da'bil is ready to leave, and I'll conclude with this story. Da'bil is ready to leave Imam al-Rida. Imam al-Rida, he comes and he brings him 100 dinars. 100 dinars that had the stamp of Imam al-Rida on it. You know Imam al-Rida because he became the crown prince during the time of Al-Ma'mun. So there was the dinar had the name of Imam al-Rida on it. The dinar within the Muslim world at that time. Imam al-Rida, he gives him 100 dinars. Da'bil, he says, oh my master, I didn't recite this poetry for the sake of the money. The Imam tells him, take it, you will need it. You're going to need it. And then Da'bil says, oh my master, I have one thing to ask you. I want you to give me your jubba. You know, this is a jubba, what you're wearing. He says, I want you to give me your jubba. that you prayed in, that touched your body when you were praying. So Imam al-Rida alayhi salam, in order to honor Da'bil ibn Ali al-Khuza'i, because he recited a poem in praise of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And by the way, at that time when you recite poem in praise of Imam al-Hussein, you're putting your life on the line. Because you're going to tell the whole world, I am with Imam al-Hussein. And that means you're going to be on the hit list of the government. And this is why Da'bil, he says, I lived for 20 years, or I don't remember, 40 years or 20 years, where the piece of wood that crucifies me is carried on my shoulder. Meaning that the death sentence had already been passed for Da'bil al-Khuza'i because of that poem. So Imam al-Rida, he goes in his room, he brings out a jubba, an outfit. He said, I've prayed in this 1,000 days and nights. 1,000 days and nights I was wearing this while I was praying Salat al-Layl. He gives it to Da'bil al-Khuza'i. Da'bil al-Khuza'i is ready to go back to Iraq, ready to go back to Kufa. He goes, he gets in a caravan. He is in the caravan. Suddenly, the caravan is intercepted by thieves. Thieves. They're coming and they want to steal the merchandise of the caravan. Marauders. You know, you have pirates and then you have marauders on land. So he said, Da'bil, the whole time he's thinking, this jubba of that Imam al-Rida gave me, it's going to get stolen. That's it. I'm going to lose it. So he said, while the thief, there's a gang of them, one of them, he's coming and he's stealing from the caravan, he begins to recite words of poetry. He begins to say, أَرَى فَيْئَهُمْ فِي غَيْرِهِمْ مُتَقَسِّمًا وَأَيْدِيهِمْ مِنْ فَيْئِهِمْ صَفَرَاتِ. Da'bil tells him, where'd you hear that from? You know whose poem this is? This is the poem of Da'bil. The man, he's reciting the poem of Da'bil al-Khuza'i while he's stealing from the camp. Because Da'bil, he's talking about the Ahl al-Bayt. He's saying, أَرَى فَيْئِهُمْ فِي غَيْرِهِمْ مُتَقَسِّمًا. The things that belong to the Ahl al-Bayt, others they have it. It's divided amongst others. وَأَيْدِيهِمْ مِنْ فَيْئِهِمْ صَفِرَاتِ. And their hands from what they own are empty. So the thief, he memorized the poem of Da'bil. Now he's stealing from Da'bil. And he begins to recite that line of the poem. Da'bil tells him, this is my poem. The man tells him, who are you? He says, do you know whose poetry you're reciting? The man says, yes, this is the poem of the taqi, the good man, the pious man, Da'bil ibn Ali al-Khuza'i. He tells him, I am Da'bil al-Khuza'i. I am Da'bil ibn Ali al-Khuza'i. So he goes and he talks to the chief. They come for the sake of Da'bil. They come and they say, this whole caravan, you take your belongings and you could go. Because of Da'bil al-Khuza'i. So Da'bil, he goes to Qom on his way to Iraq. He has to pass through Qom. He goes through Qom, and while he's in Qom, the chiefs and the scholars, they're there. A lot of them are Shia. They come and they tell him, tell us your story with Imam al-Rida. So he tells them, I sat with Imam al-Rida and he told me to recite this poem, and I began to recite, and the Imam began to cry, and he tells me, recite more, and he began to cry, and he gave me the money, the 100 dinars, and he also gave me his jubba. As soon as some of those people around, they heard that Da'bil has the jubba of the Imam, they tell him, we'll buy it from you. We'll buy it. We'll give you 100,000, or double, 10 times more what he has. He had 100 dinars, they tell him, we'll give you 1,000 dinars, or 10,000 dinars. He says, no way, I will never sell that. This is something that it has more value than anything. I'm never going to sell that to you. They tell him, okay. He leaves. Some of those ignorant people from the Shia, they love the Imam. They go and they attack Da'bil. They steal the jubba, the outfit. They steal it and they cut it up into pieces, into small pieces, and they distribute it amongst themselves. Da'bil, he becomes very upset. He goes back to the chiefs of Qom. He tells them, look what they did. Give me back my belongings. They tell him, listen, right now it's too late. It's already cut up into pieces. We'll give you one small piece if you want. We'll give you one small piece of it. He takes that piece and he goes back to Kufa. He arrives to Kufa. He sees that his house has been stolen. All of the furniture and everything, all of his belongings, they had been stolen. And he has 100 dinars that the Imam alayhi salam gave him. These 100 dinars, as we said, they were stamped by the stamp of Imam al-Rida. Some of the Shi'as in Kufa, they find out that this is Du'bil, his house has been stolen. So they come and they tell him, for each dinar we'll give you 10 times the dirhams. So he sold the 100 dinars and they gave him 10,000 or 100,000 dirhams. With that, he was able to refurnish his house. And the Imam alayhi salam, when he gave him the money, he tells him, you're going to need it. You're going to need it at one point. So this is the story of Du'bil al-Khuza'i. And he is one example of how the Imams alayhim salam encourage people to recite poetry for the sake of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. I'm going to pause here. If anyone has any questions, any comments, anything that I did not address, feel free to ask. Yes, sister.
Initially, you were speaking about the events leading up to Karbala, but one question that I think about often is, could it have ever been prevented, like the massacre of that Bayt on that day? Could things have been different?
Could things have been different? Yes, things could have been different if certain individuals would have followed the order of Rasulullah and obeyed the Imams of their time. Things would have been different. But the reality, we're saying the first who killed Imam al-Hussein was Yazid and Shumr and Umar ibn Sa'd and Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad and all these individuals. But who brought a person like Yazid to power? Who caused a man like Yazid to come to power? Yazid was a person, his grandmother, she ate at the liver of Hamza. His father and his grandfather, they were fighting Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa all the way. They fought in Badr, in Uhud, in Ahzab, all the way until the conquest of Mecca. They were against the Prophet. What would a family like that, how could they come into power, ascend to the seats of power? It goes back, you keep going back and going back and going back until you reach the event of Ghadir. This is why we make such a big deal about the Imamah of Imam Ali. Some people say, you Shi'as, you make such a big deal. No, it's not a big deal, because if Imam Ali had been followed, then none of this would have happened. Fatima al-Zahra would not have been attacked. Her son would not have been killed. The house of Fatima al-Zahra would not have been, her door would not have been set on fire, and none of these individuals would have come to power. Who brought Yazid? Muawiyah put him in power. Who brought Muawiyah to power? Muawiyah came to power during the Khilafah of the second Khalifa, Umar ibn al-Khattab. He came and he appointed him as the governor of Damascus. Then Uthman comes to power and he empowers Bani Umayyah. He brings the Umayyads, individuals like Marwan ibn al-Hakam. His father, the father of Marwan ibn al-Hakam, he was kicked out of Mecca. He was kicked out of Medina. Rasulullah, Rasulullah is so merciful, so compassionate, but he kicked out the father of Marwan ibn al-Hakam. He tells him, get out of here. I don't want to see you in Mecca anymore, in Medina anymore. Uthman comes to power. He brings al-Hakam, and he also places Marwan in the seats of power. So individuals disobeyed the Prophet from day one, then it led to Imam al-Hussein being killed. Yes. Anyone else?
There's an anonymous question.
Yes.
Yeah, it says, after Imam Hussein was killed, years later Shumr and a few of the killers were killed / avenged by a man named al-Mukhtar. How did he assume power and lead a group large enough to overthrow Yazid? And that's what happened. Can you elaborate on this?
So there were two movements that rose to avenge Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam after Karbala. One was the movement of At-Tawabin. At-Tawabin were a group of individuals in Kufa they were those who stayed in their homes or those who were in prison. Remember we said there was a group that went out to fight Imam al-Hussein. There was a group that left their houses and to fight with Imam al-Hussein. There was a group that were arrested, and there was a group that sat in their home. They said, you know what, nothing is in our hand, we can't do anything. And they started making up excuses. They stayed home. Those group, they became in the thousands, over 6,000 of them or so. They were called at-tawabin, meaning the repenters. They began a movement. They said, listen, we're going to get killed. We don't care even if we're going to get killed. We want to we want to fight Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. They go to the grave of Imam al-Hussein. They stay there for about 3 days. They hold a majlis. They cry. They weep over the grave of Abu Abdullah. And then they declare that they're turning against Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. Then in one place in Iraq, Ayn al-Warda, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, he comes with his army and he kills them all in one day. They were all killed. A Tawabin movement. Al-Mukhtar ibn Abi Ubaid al-Thaqafi, he said, I'm not going to be with the Tawabin because they're suicidal. Because they just want to go and they feel regret for what happened and they don't care. They don't want to establish something. And the Tawabin, they weren't able to seek vengeance for the martyrdom of Imam Hussein. They just went there in front of the army and they all got killed. So Al-Mukhtar, he doesn't join the Tawabin. He says, no, I'm not going to join the Tawabin. He was in prison. Then he uses his political powers. He is, for example, his wife, she's related to Abdullah ibn Umar. Abdullah ibn Umar, he writes a letter to Yazid saying, free Al-Mukhtar. Al-Mukhtar, he's freed. And then he gathers people here and there. And his slogan becomes, Ya li tharat al-Hussein. We have to seek vengeance. We're not just going to go and be remorseful and cry until we get killed. No, we have to have an active movement and we're going to seek vengeance for the murders of Imam al-Hussein. And this is exactly what he did. He ruled for a very short time, probably around 18 months. And we believe that there was a correspondence between him and Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya. Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya is the brother of Imam al-Hussein, the son of Imam Ali. Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya, he has the green light from the Imam of his time, Imam Zayn al-Abidin. Imam Zayn al-Abidin, he was leading and giving orders to Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya and to others, but from behind the scenes. So the one who was actually corresponding with Al-Mukhtar was Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya. He tells him, yes, revolt, do this, do that, do this. He gathers a group of people, and Bani Umayyah, after the murder of Imam al-Hussein, they began to collapse. Because Yazid, he ruled for 3 years. The first year he killed Imam al-Hussein. The second year he sacked the city of Medina, the city of Rasulullah. And the third year, he attacked the Kaaba. He catapulted the Kaaba. The Kaaba was destroyed and burned. Because of Yazid. Yazid doesn't care. So many of the Muslims, those who were in Kufa, the martyrdom of Imam Hussein became a wake-up call for many of these people. So Al-Mukhtar, he begins a movement and he begins to hunt down every single one of those people who were participated in the martyrdom of Imam Hussein. Shimr ibn al-Jawshan, he escapes. He sends a group of people after him. He goes and they kill him. Umar ibn Sa'd, he comes to Al-Mukhtar, he tells him, please give me safety. Al-Mukhtar tells him, I will give you safety as long as ma tuhdith hadathan. As long as you don't do anything. In the Arabic language, if you don't say ahdatha hadathan, meaning as long as you don't use the bathroom. So he understood it that as long as you don't do anything, you're safe. But Al-Mukhtar was telling him, as long as you don't use the bathroom, you're safe. So the next day, Al-Mukhtar, he sends a group of people. Umar ibn Sa'd, he along with his son, they ride a horse or a mule or whatever it is, and he escapes from Kufa, but he falls asleep while the mule or the horse was moving. While he was sleeping, the horse comes back all the way to Mukhtar. They catch him and they kill him right there. And then he says, he kills him, Umar ibn Sa'd, and his son, because his son also participated in Karbala. And he said, this is for Hussein and this is for Ali ibn al-Hussein, but they're not equal to one another. They're not equal to one another. Imam al-Hussein and Ali ibn al-Hussein, Ali al-Akbar, are not equal to Umar ibn Sa'd and his rotten son. But he said this is this is for Hussein and this is for Ali ibn al-Hussein. He captures many of them. Sinan ibn Anas, several of those people who participated in the murder of Imam al-Hussein, and he sought vengeance for them. But we believe that the real vengeance will come with Imam al-Mahdi, ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu al-sharif. And this is why there's a red flag over the dome of Aba Abdullah. You know, in the Arab culture, if someone is killed and no one has sought vengeance for this person, the family would put a red flag over that person's house, meaning this person was killed and no one has sought vengeance for this person. There's still a red flag over the grave of Aba Abdullah. Why? Because Imam al-Mahdi is going to uproot all of the evil that caused and legitimized and allowed individuals to come to power and cause the crimes that were committed on the day of Ashura. It's not just individuals. The day of Ashura was a battle of ideologies. It wasn't just a battle on land, in person. It was a battle of ideologies, and the day the ideology of Imam al-Hussein and Imam al-Mahdi prevails, that is the day real vengeance would have been gotten for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and that is going to happen inshallah through Imam al-Mahdi ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu al-sharif. Yes, brother.
You spoke about poetry. So when did modern day Latmiyas start? Like when did people start banging on their chest? When did the current form of
Yes,
Latmiyas?
this is a good question. When did the modern day Latmiya and hitting on the chest and all of that, the Latam, come out? See, there are some types of lamenting, like crying, that you know it took place during Rasulullah and the Imams of the Ahl Bayt and others. And then there is the latam, the hitting on the face, on the head. We have a general rule in Islam that jaza, if someone passes away, if your relative passes away, you're not allowed to do any of that stuff. It's haram. Because we have to say, inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un, surrender to God. But the Imams of the Ahl Bayt, they say, kullu jaza'an haram illa ala al-Hussein. Except for Imam al-Hussein, it is allowed. And how do we know that? First of all, we have the hadith of the Imam saying this. All the jaza' is haram, extensive mourning is forbidden except for Imam al-Hussein. And then we have proofs. For example, Da'bil al-Khuza'i, he goes in front of Imam al-Rida. He says, أفاطم لو خلت الحسين مجدلا وقد مات عطشانا بشط فراتي إذا للطمت الخد فاطم عنده. Oh Fatima, if you were there to see Imam al-Hussein, you would have hit your cheeks. You would have hit yourself if you see your son being killed like that. Imam al-Rida, he heard him saying that. He doesn't tell him, no, this is haram. You shouldn't say anything like that. We have one of the hujjah is qawl al-imam, the words of the imam, and taqreer al-imam. If the imam saw you doing something and he doesn't tell you this is haram, he stays quiet, that means it's halal. Because the imam has if everyone's quiet, the imam has to say this is haram. He has to speak out. So when Da'bil says, إِذَنْ لَلَطَمْتِ الْخَدَّ فَاطِم, and this is narrated, this is a very known poem. إذا للطمت الخد فاطم عنده وأجريت دمع العين بالوجنات. Imam al-Rida, he begins to cry and he encourages and he allows Da'bil to say that. So the latam was something that was practiced, and it's a sign of mourning, it's a sign of grief, it's a sign of showing sadness for something. This was the way that the Arabs at that time and many cultures, they would show their mourning. And Islam allows people to express their culture. Now people, why are they clapping? When they're happy, why do they clap? Do you tell people, why are you clapping? It's haram, why are you clapping? Did the Prophet clap? No, the Prophet didn't clap. But does Islam allow people to express emotions? Yeah. Clapping is a way of expressing happiness. Latam is a way of expressing sadness. This is according to the culture of the Arabs and many other cultures and the cultures during the time of the Imam, and until now, it's a way of showing grief. So Islam does allow that. Yes, you're not supposed to hurt yourself. You're not supposed to cause harm to yourself. All scholars say it's haram to cause harm to yourself. Yeah. Yes, brother.
So you said it's haram to cause harm to yourself. But we see in many لطم, like for example in Iraq, some people like they even
So here, this is
there's a lot of blood comes
the
out.
issue of tatbir, the issue of self-flagellation. This is a controversial issue. Different scholars have allowed it, others have not allowed it. And it goes back to the view of the marja of is this causing harm or is this not causing harm? Because here, I'm just speaking from a fiqhi perspective, not to show whether I support or don't support. From a fiqhi perspective, are you allowed to, for example, make yourself bleed? Can I go and draw blood? No. Can I go to the nurse and draw blood? Yeah. No one says it's haram to do that. So just making myself bleed is not necessarily haram. Can I come and cut off my hand? Please answer me. Yes, no, good. Good. Alhamdulillah. So you're not allowed to hurt yourself in that way. That is causing harm. But making yourself bleed is not always, they have the Arab cultures, for example, or other cultures, the hijama. What do they call it? The cupping? Is it called the cupping? Yeah. Bloodletting. So this is also something that is regarded as okay. So not to get in, say I support this or I don't support this. These are different views of different scholars. Some they say it's halal. Now is it mustahab? Is it not mustahab? This is a different issue. So it all goes back to the view of whether they see it as self-harm or they do not see it as self-harm. Anyone else? Yes. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
In the Quran Kareem, when two angels come to Hajar and Ibrahim alayhi salam, and she's shocked, the Quran says, لطمت وجهها, something along the lines, where she snaps her face.
Yes. فصكت وجهها وقالت عجوز عقيم.
Right. So in that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He didn't say what she did was wrong, but He did encourage it to take His silence of the matter as like something which is mubah. So it's basically down to culture now.
Exactly. Yes, as he said, the Quran mentions the wife of Ibrahim, when the angels tell her you're pregnant, she slapped her face. The Quran doesn't say, it's an expression of emotions. Yes, brother.
I think this is an important question that I'm going to ask. So why is it that the other sect, like our brothers and sisters in the other sect, in Sunni sect, that they always try to ignore the story of Imam Hussein, and they actually just try to ignore the whole entire story of 12 of the 12 Imams. Anytime you talk about, for example, Imam Hussein, they say, man, it's a myth. I'm talking about the public, not their scholars. Because their scholars is already like trying to always find excuses not to talk about this or not to even bring up this topic. So, what do you think is the reason?
So, first of all, not all Sunnis ignore the tragedy of Imam Hussein. I know many Sunnis that participate, they shed tears, they are very involved, and they talk about Imam Hussein. Yes, there are some who are extremists. They come and they take the side of Yazid over the side of the Ahlul Bayt. And they try to justify what Yazid did, and they tried to throw the blame on Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad and not Yazid, or Umar ibn Sa'd and not Yazid. And this comes to a hatred that some people have for the Ahlul Bayt. Because, as we mentioned earlier, if you're going to hold Yazid accountable, that means you're going to have to hold Muawiyah accountable. And then that means you're going to have to hold the one who empowered Muawiyah accountable. So they say, you know what, let's just leave this. Let's just not talk about it. It's more convenient. I'm talking about those who ignore this issue. But then there are many who say, no, Yazid was fasiq. Yazid, what he did was wrong. He killed the grandson of the Prophet, and we have to have a stance against this. So it goes back to people's understandings, people's convictions that they have. Yes.
Who is Ziyad?
Ziyad, the father of Ubaydullah. His name is Ziyad ibn Abih.
Don't we curse him?
We curse in Ziyarat Ashura, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad is cursed. Ziyad, I don't believe he is cursed in the ziyarah. I don't believe so. So, Ubaydullah, he's the son of Ziyad. But Ziyad, they call him Ziyad, the son of his dad. Imagine that. Yes. Okay, I think we're going to conclude here. There's pizza for all of you. Eat it with the niyyah of tabarruk, for the barakah of the majlis of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين.